This video is going to show you how to build a sculpture from solid clay. So there are some very specific steps which I'll cover. It'll probably require 2 videos, so this is part 1. It's important to have the real object with you so that you can study it closely, because there are certain things like proportion. There's also detail, like with this artichoke there are these little striations, these little grooves in the leaves, and it appears that on a lot of these leaves the groove that runs down the center is deeper than the grooves to either side. Alright, so little things you're not going to notice unless you have the actual object in front of you. A lot of students like to just go from their imagination, or I should say, go from their memory. And the thing is that our memories can lack detail, and they can also give you a false reality of what the actual objects really look like. So having the raw object in front of you. If you can't have the raw object in front of you for whatever reason, like maybe it's that you're wanting to sculpt an elephant, obviously you can't have it there in the room, then go by photographs, refer to photographs, and it's good to have photographs of the real object instead of a photograph of a sculpture of an elephant, and also have photographs of different views so you can really see what the entire object or animal, whatever you're rendering, looks like. Okay, so depending on what your assignment is, perhaps you can sculpt the object to its actual size, or perhaps you need to enlarge it. So what I've done is I just took a piece of paper and I decided to use the stem as the measuring guide. So I measured this distance and transferred it onto the paper. So use a component of your object, but maybe a smaller component. Like, say, for instance, figure sculptors, they'll use the head, like the length of the head, as the measuring device, and then kind of map out the body based on that. So we have this distance, and the rest of the artichoke is about twice this. So a total of 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, so that's your measuring device. Now, if you're wanting to if you want to scale up the object, then what you can do is, so this distance is this distance here, and I decided that I'm going to increase the size, so I'm going to have this part translated to this. Okay, so this is 1 unit, this is my new unit. All right, so, I've got this huge thing here. Okay, so the idea is that this is supposed to measure 1 and then 1, 2. The reason why the proportion is a little bit off on this is because my original artichoke disappeared. And so I had to rush out and get another artichoke. So the proportion from the stem to the body might be a little bit different, and also the shape of the artichoke with these demo pieces that I've already done might be a little bit different from the actual artichoke that I have here in the video. All right. So anyway, for the large piece, this is the length of the stem, and then this twice is the size of the body of the artichoke. One thing I didn't mention is that half of this will be the actual thickness of the stem. So if you take a look, all right. So we have the proportions mapped out. What I find through experience is that it works better for me to start out with more clay than I need, and then remove clay as I go, because when you pack pieces of clay together, if you don't join them really well, they could come apart later. So I'm just trying to roughly shape the body. It's a good idea to start with the body. All right, so this is more rounded. All right, the artichoke that I used for these clay pieces, it was a little bit more of there was a slight point to the end. So I'll base this on the artichoke that I have here. So this one is basically a round ball, and I'm continuing to refer to the actual object as I form. You're just roughing in the shape. Now don't get disheartened that your clay piece doesn't look like the real object. As you get the shape and the proportion down and you get the details of the leaves on, it'll look more and more like the real object. So try not to get overwhelmed. Just take each step, focus on that step, and then move on to the next step, and you'll get there. So I'm just trying to get the overall, like say for instance, if I blur my vision, I just see this sphere with a little like cylindrical shape, and that's all that I'm after. I don't want to think about or deal with detail right now. Okay. And so I'm just doing it by eye. If you feel more comfortable with being more exact by using this to help you, then go for it. It's just a tool to help you. All right, so what I would do is let this stiffen up. Now, let me backtrack here. If the shape that I'm forming is very heavy, like say for instance, if it's an object that maybe the part that's going to be underneath that is going to be sitting down on, perhaps that is a very, very weak area, and maybe very little bit of that should be touching the table. Well, what I would do is leave that area maybe thicker than I need, so that when I set it down to rest, the weight of the piece doesn't cause deformation. All right. Once the clay is stiffer, this is leather hard, I can get rid of that clay support, that excess clay that's not really a part of the real object that I'm wanting to sculpt. Okay, so you do need to think ahead. Like with this big piece, it has a flattened area, okay, because of the weight of it just sitting on the board. I didn't feel that the weight of it would distort too much, so I can work with that. Okay, so in terms of how long it takes your clay to get to leather hard, I say the bigger the piece you're working with solid, the more clay you're having to get to dry. The thicker it is, the longer it's going to take as well. So what I did with this one here is I left it uncovered for basically 24 hours. And this is the summer right now, and it's been rainy the past few days, so there's some humidity in the air. When I came in after 24 hours, what I did was I covered this part with plastic, loosely covered with plastic, and I let the rest of the piece dry for maybe 6 more hours. And then I covered the entire thing just loosely with plastic until I came back about 48 hours from the time that I initially shaped this. With the larger one, I left about 24 hours, 36 hours after shaping it. I covered the stem, and then this body I left uncovered for a total of 48 hours. All right, so that should help you, or give you an idea of the time that it takes for stuff to stiffen. All right. So once the piece is leather hard, okay, let's pretend this is set around and it's leather hard. What you want to do is first, so it's leather hard, first finish off the shaping, like get a little bit more crispness in the form. Like some of the things that perhaps would not have stayed in the shape had you tried to do it with fresh wet clay. Of course, you know, this one I'm doing would have been fine. But anyway, what you're trying to do is refine the shape of the piece. If you have like a support that's kind of built in the piece, once it's leather hard, you can shave that away. You won't need it. The other thing that you'll want to do is, if there are some deep contours in the piece, you want to get those put in on the outside before you go to the next step. Okay, so you're trying to finish off the shape of the outside as much as you can, get like the deep contours finished, etc. Okay, so once you have that done, then what you want to do is slice this in half. All right, you could slice it this way, and if you're wanting the piece to sit like this once it's finished, to be displayed and to be well, through all the processing, like being fired, etc. If you slice it this way, eventually you're going to hollow this out, and then you're going to put the halves back together. The problem with having a seam this way is the weight of this piece, even when it's hollow. The weight of it will could cause stress on the seam and cause the seam to split open, probably on the underside. So what I would recommend doing is slicing it in half this way, horizontally. All right, then you can hollow out, score and slip it together. You need an air vent, and then do your final detailing on the outside. So I'll talk more about those things in video number 2.